Hello, and welcome to our very first webinar, part of the series Create Growth, Meet the Creative Experts. This webinar and the whole series is funded by DCMS through the Create Growth D2 Hub, a University of Derby-led initiative to support the creative industries right across Derbyshire. My name is Darren Chowings, and I work as a media consultant in residence for the University of Derby, and I support their Create Growth programme. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by Rebecca Robinson, who will be covering the path to creative growth. At times, the session is going to include audience interaction using polls, and we'll also have a Q&A function, which we'll use throughout the whole session. So please feel free to use that button at the bottom of your screen that says Q&A, and we'll try and get to those questions as we move through it, and also at the end. Please note the entire webinar and all future webinars will be recorded and made available on YouTube later next month. So it's really enough from me for now. What I'm going to be doing is handing over to Rebecca now, who will be able to provide you with her expert insights. So over to you, Rebecca.
Hello, thank you, Darren. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Path to Creating Growth. I love The Wizard of Oz. Don't worry, there's going to be no defying gravity singing, but it works as a really beautiful analogy on what I actually do when I'm working with businesses. I work with creative experts who want to get to the Emerald City, and my job is to hang out on the yellow brick road, helping them get there. I see a lot of people starting things, getting really excited, and then running out of steam, or everything seems really big and they should have the answer, that they can't do things without investment, or there's no clear strategy to growth. They feel like they should know everything, then they can't focus on just being the creative expert that they are, or that everything, they go from feeling unstoppable to incompetent day by day, and they've never had such a critical boss before they work for themselves. So it's really, really difficult. And I just want to have a quick poll to see if that resonates with the audience. So Darren, if you could launch the poll, please, and let's see if this sounds familiar to anybody. So just waiting for some of the answers to come through. Okay, so yeah, it sounds okay. We've got an over-astounding 100% yes. It is something that people tackle all the time. Can I have the next slide, please, Darren? So when we're building businesses and growing, we have this mental noise that's going on in the background. And often founders I work with think that when they get to this growth point, this inflection, whether it be through investment or people coming to work with them, then that's all going to calm down a little bit. But unfortunately, that sort of, flatline bit is often when they've left the business. The majority of this noise just carries on all the way through they're growing their business. And it's always next level new devil. They'll be tackling imposter syndrome, inner critic, issues with resilience, confidence, that opportunity cost, and thinking, should they be going and doing something else? Are they in the right place? There's always new challenges, bigger stages to be on, bigger clients to work with, bigger deals to land. So, navigating that is really, really difficult. Next one, please. So who am I? My name's Rebecca, as Darren mentioned, and I act as the good witch on the path. So essentially, as we go through, we should be a little bit further along. A title slide. There we go. That's me. I work with people to build out their businesses. I work with people like the UK Space Agency, Creative UK, the growth company in Manchester, all helping businesses, whether that be technical startups through to creative industry businesses, how to grow, to work out what's the right thing for them, how to define their position in the market, increase sales, and land investment. So that's what I do day to day. Have the next one, please. Okay, so as part of this, alongside my work in incubators and accelerators, I recently finished a master's, which involved positive psychology coaching. And I did a lot of research. I spent a year of my dissertation looking at how people navigate that first 3 years of business. Now, in the startup world, we call that the valley of death because it's often when people fail, unfortunately, and when businesses become stagnant and don't grow. It's often where they need more sales, investment, but actually they've got operational costs. So there's more money going out than there is coming in. And through that research, I found some really interesting insights, which are really beautifully put together by these two researchers that are on the screen now. Essentially, the best way of navigating these first 3 years and scaling a business and being successful, we need strong leaders at the helm. If you can have a resilient leader, you're 3.2 times more likely to grow the business. And we need to have that self efficacy over capital. So, that is a really posh way of saying confidence in our own abilities. That is more important than having investment within your business if you're looking to grow it. There's also this reliance on confidence because you're the one that's out there. You're the one that's pushing the business forward, having the ideas, speaking to the customers. So you need to have that confidence in your own capability. And we need resilience because there's going to be hard knocks along the path too. So really key. And to enable some of these things, we need an openness to learn. We need to be able to trial new things through experimentation, trying different things, and having a playful attitude towards them. And that might seem a little bit sort of throwaway, but it's incredibly important because if we can lean into things and think, this may fail, it's a little bit of a risk, but I'm okay with it. We're just trying it out. That's a really helpful thing to have, a really helpful capability. And we need to be able to navigate imposter syndrome because very few people that I meet in terms of the entrepreneurial world don't suffer from that, don't have that little sort of inner critic voice speaking to them. So we need to work out things to make sure that we can get through these. So what does that look like? Next slide, please. Oh, can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so what does this look like? Essentially, we get rid of it in a number of ways. Now, this is a picture of me drinking champagne in the Grand Canyon in 45-degree heat. And is that how we should go about things? Well, kind of, yeah, because I was celebrating my master's. I was doing something. Now, don't get me wrong, the Valley of Death is not the Grand Canyon, but they're pretty close and they're pretty similar in terms of conditions. We need to do things that deliberately we deliberately do things that make sure that we can actually have the tools to navigate this valley of death. So what do those things look like? I'm going to walk you through them now. So, but first, on the next slide, we're going to have a look at what we need to avoid. So there's some huge things that I see founders doing along this path, along the yellow brick road, which get them into trouble. And it's really, really hard. I've seen hundreds and hundreds of startup founders and creative founders struggle with the same thing. So let's have a look at those first, and then we can move on to how we tackle them. So can I have the next slide, please? Okay. So some of the big things, distractions and red herrings. A lot of people spend time chasing grants. They develop, IP or solutions and offerings to the market, which aren't actually needed because they were grant funded or they spent their time chasing them. They looked at getting that investment within their business rather than actually building it up. They also don't price appropriately. They haven't got the money coming in that's required and that a real understanding of the nuts and bolts in terms of the finance of their business. They often get caught up in the wrong type of business as well and expectations for that business, which can make growth really, really difficult. Founders can lack direction as well. They haven't got a clear understanding of what they want to do next. And as I mentioned earlier, imposter syndrome sneaks in. There's fluctuations in confidence. There's almost this continuation from excitement to fear. And it's something we really need to tackle, as well as that emotional dysregulation that can really get people off track. So what are the antidote to these problems? Next slide, please. Our hero along the journey, the lovely Dorothy, needs to have the right mindset. We need to have things in place that keep you mentally sound and get that confidence. The practices that come with that as well to develop the confidence are essential. And we also need to have a lot of self-compassion along the way. We need to look after ourselves because we are the business at the end of the day. Next slide, please. Okay, so number one, mindset, the scarecrow. Let's have a look at some of the things associated with mindset on the next slide. Right, okay, so often we launch businesses and we're out there as ourselves, and people find it quite difficult to actually be out there talking about our own capabilities. It's a huge mindset blocker. So we need to have a consideration about whether we should be advertising the business as a brand or us personally. And just that subtle shift sometimes and going from Rebecca Robinson, the consultant, to Rebecca Robinson, who runs the Growth Playground, can have a huge difference and make life a lot easier when you're going out there. We need to consider what business really suits you as well. Is it a lifestyle business? Do you want to run an agency? Are you looking for high scale growth? I remember once speaking to a founder who wanted to run this huge business because ultimately she wanted to own a donkey sanctuary. Now, there's no point in putting yourself through 5 years, 10 years worth of hard work to end up somewhere where actually you could have just taken a different path to. So, understanding what really works for you is really essential, and having realistic aspirations as well. So as human beings, we really struggle with time horizons more than 3 months. So anything beyond that almost becomes never, never land. And we wildly overestimate what we can achieve in a year and underestimate what we can achieve in a decade. So having a real plan in terms of, what you want to do and when you want to do it is really, really key. Considering the opportunities and the ways you're going to get to growth. So there's 4 roads that they speak of. You can either farm your current customer base and get more of the same business from them. You can take the same offering to a new set of customers or a new sector. You can develop new products, or you can go into new territories and new sectors with new products. All of them have different pros and cons, but having a bit of a plan there and considering what your options are really, really essential. And also knowing your key metrics as well. So understanding things like the cost of customer acquisition, how often they tend to stay with you and what their lifetime value is, what the profitability is on a certain bit of work as well. And in terms of clients, are some far better to work with and take less time and run the projects run more towards the time that was quoted versus those that really drain your time and energy. Understanding these things will mean that actually when we're looking to dial things up, we can see how much change has been impacted. We've also got pipeline and process. So understanding what businesses you've got coming, the likelihood of having that business helps us, placate those feelings of fear and concern as to whether we're on the right track. And processes as well, putting standard operating processes in businesses, as much as it seems a bit OTT for small businesses, is really, really essential. It would have been a good 10 phone calls in the space of a fortnight with coaching clients that I work with, all about putting processes in their business so that the staff know what they're doing, they know what they're doing, everything is repeatable, which essentially makes you far more efficient and profitable. A real consideration needs to be as well whether you need investment for growth. It comes with pros and cons again. So obviously, you can get a stack of cash, which means that you can invest in some, more resources. You can make things a little bit more cost effective. You can get staff to help you in disciplines that you might not have personally. But you do need to consider whether you want to give up that equity, whether you want to potentially buy yourself someone that you're answering to. An investor is almost like a boss to a certain extent. They will have an opinion. They will also want to be involved in key decisions as to where you drive the business and how you develop it. So it's really, really important that we understand if investment is for us. And if that's the case, spend our time appropriately with that, rather than going down that path, spending a lot of time chasing investors and actually realizing it's not really right for us. And lastly, just looking at 1% improvements each day, each week will make a huge impact. And those slight incremental changes have this insane compound interest effect. So realistically, if you make a 1% change every day, you'll actually end up 37 times better through the course of the year. So just those little tiny pieces of change will make a huge impact. And having this kind of mindset of intentionality and having a plan is really, really key. Okay, so on to the next one, please. Okay, so the next one is courage or bravery, the lion in the Wizard of Oz. Next slide. So, in terms of this, the things that we want to be looking at are things like lean startup and experimentation. So, this is something that's taught a lot in the tech world, lean startup, and it's this whole thing about doing more with less, trialing and testing ideas, and making sure that we're actually backing the right horse. So when we're looking to grow our business, we've got a world of opportunity, but understanding what we need to be focusing on and understanding that quickly is really, really important. So by doing some small tests, if you Google times of lean startup experimentation, you'll come up with a plethora of different ways where you can test business ideas that don't take a lot of time, don't take a lot of money, but make sure that the time and resources you are investing in are the right ones for you. We've also got market appropriate pricing and balance. This one is a huge one. If we want to just drop onto the next slide, I will show you my Venn diagram. So when I speak to people about pricing, they often get in a real tangle, especially if they're acting as an individual. And it's very much a case of, these are my skills that are being sold and I'm having to sell myself. And when we're looking at that, we need to consider a couple of things. We need to know the market and the budget that our clients have, but also we need to consider, how we feel about the pricing. So it has to be this Venn diagram, in my opinion, of a price that feels appropriate, that, you don't want to vomit when you say it out loud, but also how much, resentment you'll feel if you don't do it at a higher price. So having to work that out in the middle is really, really essential to try and understand what we should be doing and how we should be pricing. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? Right, so what else have we got? Intentionalism and goal setting. This is really key. We don't know where we're going to end up if we haven't actually made a plan, if we haven't got a goal in mind. So thinking about where we want to end up is really, really key. If you can decide where you want to be in 5 years' time, you can actually put a plan in place to really work that out, put processes in there, make sure that you're building in the right way that's going to help you achieve them. It's a huge thing in terms of having targets, having an understanding, thinking about what you're going to do that year, where you want to be, and then making choices that are deliberate to that. So if you have a plan that you want to be, exiting your business in 5 years' time, or that you want to have a staff of 30, for example, in 10 years, what does that path to growth look like? How can you set that out and make sure that you're going to be on that path and getting there? So the next one as well is confidence. Now, this is a really big one for me. I speak to entrepreneurs who will start their businesses. They were incredibly good at what they did in an environment that supported them when they were employed, and then they stepped away from it. Now, by stepping away from it, actually, the thing that made them feel confident and feel capable was the thing that's stripped away. In terms of my master's research, it was a huge thing in terms of this confidence and resilience is actually the workplace structures that people have. Having those feedback loops from bosses, knowing that they have teammates to call upon that create psychological safety that helps them actually take risks and do big things is stripped away. And this is the kind of irony of the self-employment piece, which is really, really difficult. So we need to try and instill these and get them from somewhere else. And there's a few different ways that we can do that. So reflection and evidence building is a huge one. I have it. I have an evidence board that's right here next to me. And anytime I do something that's successful, I will put it up there as a reminder, because your body will only remember things that are negative because they are dangerous. Back in the day, cavemen times, we had to remember things that were dangerous to keep us alive. So we have this innate, skill, this capability, which, for a modern day person isn't necessarily that helpful or useful. So we need to make sure that we're remembering the positive, and that will have this broaden and build effect, which is really, really essential. So some of the things you can do are, journaling at the end of the day, thinking about what needs to be, done to be, to learn on and build on these capabilities, and look to see what you are achieving on this path, because you're climbing a mountain, and if you're constantly looking up, you can't see how far you've come. So that's really, really essential. And take them out every so often, have a reflection on what you've been up to and where things are going, and it's really, really good. So the last thing we have is on this self-promotion. And this is a really big one for me. You need to be out there. You need to be speaking to people, telling them what you do, telling them what you're good at, what other people like about you, and how to buy from you. And these are pretty essential if you run your own business. But often it's a big blocker, a mental blocker, because people don't, it's not a very British thing to do. They don't want to be out there self promoting. But this day and age, unfortunately, is essential. And this whole piece where, you versus the business can really come into play, because it's far easier to talk about what the business has been doing and how the business has been successful. That's fine, because as a byproduct, customers can still see what you're capable of. And knowing how to buy from you is another major thing. So we don't need to be stuffing it down people's throats all the time in terms of, how they can be sold to. But the people need to have a clear path and understand the service that you offer, what you can do for people, and how actually you can move forward with them as customers. So that's a really essential one. And when we're working that out as well, it not everyone's perfect at it at first. Everyone learns how they go through this, process of being out there, being online, for example. And you can choose your medium, which you feel comfortable within. So it's really key to understand where your customers live, what kind of thing that they like to consume, but also what really works for you. What is that preferred style? How do you want to go about it? Is it LinkedIn? Is it, via TikTok, for example, and you're showing people your work and capability? It doesn't really matter as long as the customer base is there and it's in a medium that you can feel comfortable with. We need to consider, frequency, because we don't want you to burn out. We want to make sure that actually you are doing it consistently. We need to work with the algorithm gods. So yeah, making some of those choices is really, really essential. But we need to tell people we're open for business. Social media is just a shop front and you can style it any way you like. So next one, please. Okay, compassion. This is a big one. So as part of my master's, I looked at positive psychology. And that was all about how we thrive, how we flourish as human beings. So prior to 2000, psychology was all about the negative and how you could bring someone up to an even playing field. And then this new form of psychology came in, which still look back at all the great stuff and theories that have been done prior to 2000. But essentially, it looked at what was the best way for a human being to start, upping the ante and performing better and being happier in the process. And compassion is a huge piece of that. The next slide, please. Yes, it's so big. I mean, I often say this, your business will only grow as much as your nervous system will allow it. And I think that's an essential thing. If everything feels like a threat and you're putting yourself out there in terms of, everything feels dangerous. So sales, investors, customers, you're not going to be able to turn up in this easy breezy state that inspires confidence. So we really need to be compassionate to make sure our nervous system feels okay, we're okay to perform, and obviously then we can achieve the goals that we're setting ourselves. Next slide. Okay, so what does this look like? Personal operating systems are a huge thing as far as I'm concerned. And that goes from your working style to who you work with, the times of day that you like to work, for example, and also different practices as well. So understanding whether you are a day person, a night person, whether you have bursts of energy in the morning and then like take it slower later on. Have a look at these cycles and see how you best perform and play into those things. Often when we come out of the corporate, we take a while to kind of shake it off and get into our own routine and style. But this is one of the most important things. You don't have to play by anyone else's rules anymore. It's your business. You can do it the way you like. So you work on the hours that you want to work. You do it in the approach you have. If you've got to work with clients, that's fine. You can fit their hours to a certain extent. But the rest of the time, you're a master of your own destiny. Um, a big thing as well, I think, is reflecting on your capabilities and style of work and looking to see who can plug the gaps around that. So in Rocket Fuel, it's an amazing book that talks about integrators and visionaries. Now, Walt Disney was a visionary. He had the huge ideas for Mickey Mouse. He was incredibly creative, but the whole thing wouldn't have existed without Roy Disney, who was his brother. And he was the ops person. He was the person that brought these things to life. So we need to understand how we work and what we're good, because if we're full of ideas and that's the thing that energizes, but they don't get done, we're not going to get where we need to be. So we need to make sure that we understand ourselves, and no one knows us better than ourselves. And then we can work to kind of collaborate appropriately. Another thing is huge, sleep, exercise, diet. And I know these things may sound, sort of formulaic, and you get told 1,000 times to eat well, etc. But it does make a huge difference. And having things like gratitude practices as well, so reflecting on the day and considering what went well, and they don't necessarily have to be the big wins that go on the evidence board, but thinking about what was successful, what did you achieve, what did you learn, and having that reflective period at the end of the day can make a massive difference and help your nervous system feel like actually things are going well, it's not dangerous, we're okay. It's really, really important. um, in terms of sort of psychological noise as well, I'm a huge fan of non-sleep deep rest meditations. So they have an amazing effect on your brain, and even just 20 minutes will calm everything down, make sure you're in the right mindset, you can get your thinking done and get the things achieved that you need to. Zest creators. So, zest is a psychological term. It's a character trait, and it's all about this get up and go that entrepreneurs have. And that is a huge thing because it is the energy of our businesses. It's where innovation comes from. It's incredibly essential, and has huge benefits. So, to make sure that it doesn't get too depleted and we can create more of it, we need to have things in there like boundaries, decent agreements with clients, making sure that people aren't bothering you outside of working hours, that you are resting and spending time with family and friends and kind of like re energizing. Because otherwise, it's just a long, hard toil to growth, and you will actually get to enjoy and reap the rewards of it. And we need cheerleaders around us as well. So often our families and friends, are supportive of what we want to do, but they don't necessarily get it. They might be thinking, why on earth did you jettison that job that was paid incredibly well, into oblivion so you could do your own thing? The people you need around you are other people who are like minded, those people who are doing similar things, understand what you're going through. So, hang out with other founders, speak to other entrepreneurs, go to meetups, work with people like Create Growth in terms of the courses, and have that support network around you to make sure that you've really got that infrastructure. Coaches as well are incredibly helpful. I am personally a coach. When I worked in incubators and accelerators, I realized that in terms of that, Venn diagram of key components, I could teach people the leadership skills. I could teach them how to run their business. I could teach them how to navigate investor landscapes, for example. But in terms of that central piece where they needed to, really have the mindset in place, they needed a coach. They needed someone to help them reflect, see the patterns, see the behaviors that were potentially limiting them in terms of their progress. And play as well. So, as I mentioned earlier, like having that playful attitude and having a creative outlet is really, really important. And often, when we have this business, which was our creative outlet, and has gone from being this muse and inspiration and thing we enjoy and love to expecting it to pay the rent, it's incredibly hard. So, we need to have that delineation. We need to make sure that if we're considering growing a business that was a hobby or a passion or a love, that we don't expect too much from it in the first instance. We give it the opportunity to thrive and grow. So it might be a case of actually you need to bootstrap it with another activity. You have a 9 to 5 that you work 3 days a week, and you do that, the thing you're trying to grow for 2 days, and put less pressure on it. In terms of those expectations of the business, we need to have a fine balance and make sure that we're, letting things breathe and growing naturally. Um, Emotional agility is a huge one for me. Um, Burnout comes from not acknowledging your humanness and not understanding the emotions we're going through. So most people think that they're either sad, mad, or glad, but actually there's 80 something emotions. And interestingly, research has shown that if you're able to name the emotion, you can actually process it better. Your brain knows what to do with it and how to interact with it if we actually put a word to it, a name to it. So by doing that, it's really, really essential. And in terms of burnout as well, back in caveman days, we might have got chased by a saber-toothed tiger and we would run back to the cave, high five our friends and be like, woof, that was interesting, but the bugger didn't kill me that time. We don't have this same way in terms of the modern world. We have a laptop that even when we close it, it's still there. There's still a threat. And that's why your brain is constantly running on overdrive. It will cause issues with your digestion, with your sleep, with your mental state. And we need to make sure that doesn't happen. So we need to have this clear delineation between sort of work and rest time. And that might be a case of, processing those emotions, processing whatever's going on in your body in terms of nervous system feelings. So that's why exercise comes in, but also creativity, art. There's a huge amount of different activities that you can do that help you process those feelings and feel like you're in a different state afterwards. Because if you don't, it has an impact on your sleep, which has an impact on your stress, and you get in this horrible cycle. Essentially, we have a stress bucket as human beings. And when it gets to the top, you've got very little room before it overspills. And that then causes issues, and there's all kinds of fallout. Now, to clear that stress bucket daily, we have REM sleep. But your sleep can only involve about 40% REM sleep, because that's when you process the things that happen through the day. Anything more than that, you wake up in the middle of the night. Then you go into thinking mode and think about all the stuff that's going on and that's rattling around. That is not helpful. So we need to make sure that we're doing things that keep stress levels lower, which means that the stress bucket isn't as full, which means that the REM sleep can then clear it, which means you start the following day with less in the stress bucket. You have an empty stress bucket. So we're not in this horrible cycle. So really, really key. Another big thing is limiting self-talk, especially negative self-talk, and that internal monologue. Mo Gawdat has done some really lovely pieces in terms of his book Unstressable about this topic. And actually, that inner monologue is not you. I've just moved my hand. I didn't have to there wasn't a voice inside my head that said, Rebecca, move your hand. It just did it. So this voice inside our head, this inner critic, is not us. That's not what we're talking about. It's something very, very different. So yes, it's really key that we stop criticizing ourselves. Another great book is Playing Big by Tara Moore, and she talks about this voice and where does it come from? Who is it? Where are those thoughts? Is it Karen that you went to school with? Is it your mum? Is it whomever? And trying to understand that and really get on top of it. And also, ironically, the other way, positive self-talk is incredibly helpful. So if you have these mantras, if you have these little sayings to yourself that can help you, it really does have an impact. Even Ronaldo, when he's going to do a penalty, will say, it's normal for me to score goals. You belong on this football pitch. This is what you do. And those kind of things will be incredibly helpful. And the last thing, celebration. So this takes us back to the Grand Canyon. We need to make sure that we are, getting involved, really celebrating these things, understanding what's going on in our business and reflecting on them, and then doing something to celebrate it, to make a milestone of it. So that could be taking yourself out for a nice meal with your partner or a friend. It could be a case of buying something. Personally, I have a thing where I buy Snoopy things. You can probably see them behind me. Every time I go down and deliver something big in terms of, I don't know, it might be something with the UK Space Agency, for example, where I act as an investment expert. I'll go to Liberties and buy myself a little treat. And then when I see it on my wall, I think I did something big there. It reminds me of what I've done. So having these little mementos and these little points where we go, yes, that was a job well done, is really, really essential. Okay, so hopefully, and I understand that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but these things will be essential kind of building blocks to help you in your growth path. There's lots of different ways to grow businesses. There's lots of different things that can come up, but really understanding this mindset piece, having some self-compassion, and also putting in practical steps in terms of your business can be really key. I've worked with video game agencies, for example, who have massively impacted their turnover and been able to grow and bring new people on, purely because they've really scrutinized the margins of their business, the productivity, how they can best align people with their clients. We'll ask for more business as well. Structuring the business in the right way can have a huge impact and make it far easier than going out there and making new sales with new customers and spending that time and effort to try and achieve those things. By purely, tightening up things internally, having those little 1% changes can have a huge impact. Things like scrutinizing contract values, for example, and how much you normally charge somebody. Is that market rate? Have you become better and more skilled and capable since you started working for them? And therefore, you need to reflect that in a change of rates. All these things, just these little tweaks around, can make a massive impact. So it's definitely worthwhile having consideration, thinking about what you can do, and bringing that on. Okay, so shall we move to some questions? Okay.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. So for the audience that are on the webinar, you can still use the Q&A button to send in questions. So please do that as we move through them now. I found that really, really interesting. So thank you. I've got a few myself, so I'll probably start
go for it.
With one of my own, and then I'll move on to the list. So the first one I really wanted to ask you was around distractions. So earlier on, you'd said that business owners fall into bad habits and get distracted easily.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a couple, but I wondered whether or not you could expand on what typical distractions you see more often, and whether they are healthy or not, and what to do about them.
Yeah, no worries. So the big one I see is people chasing grant money because they think that it is a free chunk of cash, which, don't get me wrong, it is, and it's wonderful. If you can do that and it aligns to the style of business that you're great at and the roadmap for your business, then fantastic. But I see in both creative industries and tech, people going off on a different angle to fulfill the grant money. So they've spent a load of time in terms of actually the submission of the documentation, or whether they're successful or not, they might go on to the next one because they think they have to. That's the only way that they're going to drive their business forward rather than actually concentrating on sales. And the problem is, even if they're successful, there's a huge amount of paperwork. There are expectations, deliverables that aren't necessarily aligned to your core business function. So you can kind of end up over here. I've seen clients, come to me and they've been a couple of years in and they've got this market offering, which is sort of over here, that's been paid for with grant money. And actually the customer and the market needs them to be over here. And they can't pivot that way because they're kind of stuck with this thing, or there's something that unfortunately is no use to anybody. So it's a massive shame. And people thinking that they need investment to grow, whereas actually if they tweak things in the right way and then have an intentional plan to growth in the other and kind of take that two-pronged approach, it makes a massive impact. I've had people come to me before now saying, I want to get investment. What can we do? And actually, when we've talked it through, it's not really appropriate for them. It's not really appropriate. They're going to struggle to find the type of investor they want. It's not the kind of business that they want to run. So by tweaking things and having a real plan, we've still hit the growth milestones that they wanted to achieve, but they've done it with less money, less resource, and they still own 100% of their business. So that's where that lean startup thing really comes in. It is a godsend. When I left consultancy, I worked in big digital agencies and was a consultant in terms of business growth. Everyone was constantly looking at me for the answer. And then when I found lean startup, it's like this moment where life becomes easier. You don't have to know exactly what you're doing, but you've got a load of resources. It means you can test the idea. You can have a hypothesis, go, is this the right thing to do? Yes or no? From data, from actual, customers telling you what's the right thing. And it doesn't take a load of time. It doesn't take a load of money. And you can build things out slowly but surely. So it makes a massive difference.
Okay, great. And it's really interesting you say about the investment piece in terms of distraction, because I suppose we could do a whole other webinar just on the road to financing startups.
Yes.
And all of that. But it's a really healthy reflection to talk about investment in a positive way, but it not necessarily being the be all and end all to all growth for all
Yeah,
businesses, because it's not. So
it really isn't. Yeah, do you know, I spent yesterday, so I work on Create Growth for the growth company in Manchester. And
yeah,
we had a day with, I think it was like 10 founders, which was a fast path to investment, fast track. And it is, people really need to understand what they get themselves in for. A lot of people think that they have to have investment to grow their business, but they need to realize that once you're on the start of this escalator, it doesn't stop. And everyone will be critiquing and considering what you did with the last tranche of investment before you get the next, and so on and so forth. And you really are on a specific growth trajectory that's not necessarily appropriate for people. There's nothing wrong with having a lifestyle business. You can have a great business that turns over 100 grand, 150 grand, take a sizable chunk of that out as an individual and work far less time and be your own boss if you choose. You don't have to have this mega business that is on track to be a unicorn. It doesn't work like that.
great. Thank you very much. So I'm going to move to some audience questions now. Again, reminder to everyone, this session is quite an open one. So if you've got just some general questions or anything that's you're thinking about, but not sure how to phrase, don't worry, we will try our best to answer it in an anonymized fashion as well. And you can ask anonymously as well. So we've got a question here around funding. So thank you for that. This question really looks at where to find funding for a startup. Have you got any recommendations on where one might look,
Okay.
and maybe a bit on how to look as well? So there's one thing finding it, and the other is trying to suss out whether it's worth your time or effort in applying and all of that stuff. So a bit on
Definitely.
that would be great.
So there's different types of funding. You've got angel and VC. So that's equity, where you give up part of your business in return for some money. And that can be a case of it's through a raise, or maybe you go into an incubator or accelerator and they will take some equity and give you some cash in terms of you being on the program. There is grant funding, or competitions as they tend to call them these days. So depending on the world you're in, it might be Innovate UK, it could be Creative England, it could be any number of things. So it all depends on the type of startups. There's debt financing, that can help you fund the business if you have some kind of income and it's a specific type of growth. But I'm going to take a punt in the fact that they've used the word startup, which makes me think it is some kind of person who wants VC funding. And with that, and to be fair, this applies as well if you're going for competition grants. You need to show uniqueness. You need to show traction. Very few people these days are getting any kind of funding without showing a decent level of income with their business. So often they will have had an idea. You need to create some kind of MVP, a minimum viable product, which essentially a customer could buy. So whether that's a service, and you can use experiment. There's actually a Wizard of Oz experiment where you pretend to be the digital tool behind the scenes, and actually, the customer still gets the benefit of it. Any way you can show that actually there's proper market demand and people will pay for that and they really truly need it, and the market is an appropriate size as well. That's what you need to showcase. And a lot of the time I spend when as an investment expert or working in accelerators is actually making sure that we're getting that evidence that means investors can say yes to us, because realistically they have to have the return on that investment. Now an angel who's a high net worth individual might just be happy to give someone 50 grand to do something with an earlier stage than a VC, but they're still going to have a return on investment expectation. So they, realistically, it's you or buying a case of wine that might go up, tenfold in value. They're in the business of just making money. So you need to showcase, you're the person who's going to do that, and you can, make things happen. You can be productive, proactive, spend your time and money well, but actually the opportunities there in the market. So really concentrate on getting that down in the first instance and making sure it's actually something that you want to spend your time on. So A lot of the time I see founders where they've had this a first idea, they're excited about it, but actually it's not really the thing that's going to make them the money that's the right thing to commit to, but they hold on to it for dear life. Just spend a little bit of time working out what you feel passionate about, what has got a real, big opportunity in the market, and spend your time committed to that. Because otherwise, you're just going to waste a load of time. You're not going to get where you need to be. 5 years later, you'll be like, well, that was just a waste of my time and effort. Time is one of the biggest resources you have. So make sure you're factoring, so you're focusing on the right thing. That would be my quick fire
Right.
advice.
Thank you very much. And just another thing on funding. So a part of the Create Growth offer is there's a newsletter digest that focuses on funding and professional development. So in future emails about this webinar that you'll receive when as part of registering, you'll also get information on funding direct from us as well. So just keep an eye on your inbox for that. And they're select pieces. So I'm going to move to another couple of questions. So the next one is around combating imposter syndrome. So Rebecca, do you have any tips to combat imposter syndrome and fear of failure? I feel like this is really holding me back from growing my business.
Okay. So number one thing is everyone has imposter syndrome, without a shadow of a doubt, unless you're a bit of a psychopath. Everyone has it. So it's totally natural. It's totally normal. This evidence piece is a huge thing. Showcasing that you're capable, even if it's a case of it's not stuff that's going on right now, but actually in the past where you've navigated, difficult weather, you've achieved something that at the time felt impossible. We need to remember that, because that tells us that we are capable of these things. I know vets, for example, who, if I've asked them the first day of veterinary school whether they'd be able to operate on an animal, they're not a cat in hell's chance. But actually, they're 5 years into being a vet. It's like, yeah, I've done 4 operations today. No biggie. We need to just take these steps and go, right, what do we think we want to achieve? How are we going to get there? Have this kind of like slow path, and taking these little chunks and also reflecting at the time, going, right, I did that thing. Amazing. Pat on the back. I am capable. Slowly but surely, kind of like keep on trucking. Yeah. In terms of that, growing the business and fear of failure thing, the experiments, you can ask other people what they want of you. A lot of the time, people get in their own head and they have this fear of failure piece because they think that they have to know all the answers. They think that they can't go from being an artist, for example, to a business owner because they don't know all the things about business. But taking this lean approach to learning and developing, you only do what you need to do at that point in time to the next step. You don't need to know all the things. I work with people who run agencies, and they're beating themselves up about the fact that they're not able to do X, Y, and Z. I'm like, but I can't develop things like you do. It's not my forte. You don't have to be amazing at everything. You literally just need people around you who've kind of like walked the path beforehand, who can help you along and kind of go, this is the watch out, that's the pitfall. Don't get trapped in that thing, and help you work it out and process it. You only need to know the next step. It's not a case of like, how do we get to the top of Everest? It's literally just a case of, right, in the next couple of weeks, this is my little goal. I'm going to get to that one. I'm going to celebrate it, show my body that I'm capable of it, and then we keep on moving. So yeah, baby steps would be my thing. There's also one about manage your chunks. So in the beginning of my journey and struggling to feel completely overwhelmed at the prospect of running my own art business, how can I break it down into manageable chunks to tackle the first steps and while balancing creating art at the same time? That was the point I made earlier in terms of this. If it's the muse, the biggest killer of creativity is making your art pay the rent without a shadow of a doubt. So the more time you can lower expectations on that and have it so that you get income from elsewhere and spend your free time, or even in this case, you buy yourself a little bit of time during the week to create art, and build up a bit of, business that way, and consistency and income, and proof that you are capable of doing this without it being, the sole income, which creates this scarcity and panic. It's really important. I did it the first, so I'm 3 years into my business now. The first year, I didn't do things that I expected to do. I used all the skills that I had and did workshops and design sprints and all these different things, and worked in different sectors, which meant that I paid the mortgage, which kept the fear at bay. But I would have a day or two a week where I focused more on the stuff that I was enjoying. I let my coaching practice build. I coached people for free for a period of time because I just wanted to exercise that muscle. I'd done it in house in Accelerator, but because it was now me offering that service direct, it felt a little bit uncomfortable, but I wanted to work on it. So I did everything in my power to give it a bit of space to breathe. And slowly but surely, you change the ratio. Most people I know who are self-employed still do some kind of freelance gig behind the side, to help bootstrap the business they're trying to grow. If you just one day wake up and decide, I'm going to do this business, quit the day job, I can guarantee you'll be a nervous wreck within 2 or 3 weeks, because you'll just be it becomes a very expensive hobby. You will sit there, smacking your head against a brick wall, trying to work out what I should be doing next. It's not a good state to be in. So yeah, slow and steady. Give yourself some opportunity. Try and keep scarcity at bay. Yeah, and just build it out that way.
Great. I think that it's a really great question, to be honest, because around creative businesses and those that work in the screen industries as well, trying to create art and also make a living from it and balance the two is a very tricky thing. And like you say, it can kill it dead a bit if you go in too heavy at the start. So that's really good. Focus on time management.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Just a quick one in terms of funding that I didn't mention. It's always worth looking at things like crowdfunding. So Kickstarters, for example, they are not as popular and effective as they once were. So when during COVID times, you could raise quite a bit of cash quite easily, but they are still, in terms of the creative industries and people wanting to see and back creative, projects. They're a great thing to do if you can spend some time and your creativity in terms of a decent campaign. It's a great way to potentially get a little bit of money, that's seed money, which buys you some time to be able to focus on the business that you want to build.
Great, thank you very much. So I've got a couple of quick questions. We'll have to do quick answers before we go into the close. But
no worries.
The first one is a finance one. So is bidding for tenders better than applying for angel or VC investment? That's a tough question. So
it depends on the industry. It depends on, if in terms of the tender, if it is aligned with what you do and your skill set and where you want your business to go and the type of clients you want to work with, fantastic. It's roll your dice. It's, do you think you're likely to get it? I spent some time in the first year, 2 of my business doing tenders. I didn't find them worthwhile. They were a hell of a lot of effort with not a lot of reward. Actually, utilizing my network, being out and about, talking about what I do was far more effective in terms of me winning business than a tender was.
Great. Okay, thank you. And then the final question. It feels exhausting to constantly show up online. Top tips for posting content, please. So I think this question is about social media management, how to.
I get it. Like I feel it myself. Like I don't know many people who don't, to be perfectly honest with you. And I tend to go to a phase where I will do it frequently, and then literally my body goes, no, panic, too much, don't like it. And it's what suits you. So is there a way that you can turn up where it's not necessarily you, or it's a case of you talk to a friend? So I have a colleague that I work with, and I do video podcasts, and because I enjoy chatting to him about interesting stuff. There's lots of different ways to do it, especially in the creative industry. If you can show behind the scenes how you do something, because people like to know how people do things that they can't. There's lots of different ways to do it, but I think that, committing to, say, doing 1 or 2 posts a week and just getting into that. A big thing, garbage post challenge. So a lot of people don't do it because they're scared of that rejection. They're scared of being, carrying down the street and be like, well, she thinks a lot of herself because she's always on LinkedIn, for example. Just posting content. Simone Soul, who's a coach, talks about the garbage post challenge, where you post 100 posts in 30 days on like Instagram, and they're just throwaway content, and it would teach your nervous system that it's okay and you're not going to get burnt at the stake over it. And it kind of lowers the stakes, and people just want to see you being authentically you. So it doesn't have to be business related. Show your personality, show what you're about, people by people. And it's the same with investment. It needs to be appropriate for the sector you work in, but investors want to work with somebody that they know, like, and trust. So being out there is really helpful.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Rebecca. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the closing sequence. So I'm going to thank you now, Rebecca. That was really, really good session. For everyone that's on the call, if you're wanting to get any more support or wise words from Rebecca, please follow her on LinkedIn. I will be providing her details in the chat in just one moment. Actually, I'll do it now, so you've got it. So one moment. Here you go. Okay, so her details are now in the chat. And I'll say bye to you, Rebecca, and then I've got a few more bits for the audience. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so I've got some really exciting news. So this is exclusive information. We're going to be holding a really big industry day over at Derby's Museum of Making in January. And this is a first look at the date. So we would really and thoroughly recommend that you held this in your diary. We'll be running between 10 and 3. And the day is going to include multiple masterclasses, a professional panel, and plenty of time for you to meet other creative freelancers and businesses for networking. On top of that, we're going to be providing a great free lunch and tea and coffee all the way through to boot. So it's going to be a brilliant day. The running order for that will be shared with you in December, but it is looking brilliant. So ahead of it being published in December, please hold the date that you can see on screen now in your diary. So Monday, the 27th of January, 10 till 3. And another thing is, if you enjoyed this webinar, which I'm hoping you did, please register from today for our next session with Tom Millen. So he'll be focused on how to use mixed reality technology in your creative practice. During the session, Tom's going to give examples on how the technology is shaping the way art is created and how you might be able to develop these skills yourself. So this is talking about mixed reality, virtual reality, and augmented reality. So that is a must attend if you can do that. So I'm going to pop that in the chat now, and that is exclusively available today for the first time. So make sure that you get your ticket. And then finally, just as a thanks to Rebecca, I'm going to close the session now, but for us to help future webinars, we've got one single question for you that will be posted at the very end of the webinar. If you can give us feedback on whether this has been helpful, and just a sentence on that experience, that would really, really help us to plan out who we have as future speakers and go from there. But from me, it's been really, really exciting to talk to Rebecca, to hear her thoughts. It's been brilliant to kick off this webinar series for Derby, and I hope you enjoyed it. But thank you for today, and we'll see you at the next one in January, and also the industry day. So thank you very much.